You know that feeling when you win a battle but lose yourself in the process. That's exactly where you are right now. You did something most people never dare to do. You turned around. You walked straight into your own darkness. You faced your shadow, that part of yourself you spent years hiding, denying, running from, and you survived. But here's what nobody tells you about shadow work. The real challenge isn't facing your demons. It's learning to live after you've met them. It's figuring out who you are when you're no longer the person you used to be. You touched the rage that lived beneath your people-pleasing. You felt the grief you buried under productivity. You named the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. You looked into the mirror of your wholeness, the beautiful and the ugly, the light and the dark, and it didn't kill you. But now you're standing in the aftermath. The storm has passed. The mirror has shown you everything: your rage, your shame, your abandoned dreams, your hidden truths. And you're asking the question that keeps you up at night: what now? You're not alone in this question, and you're exactly where you need to be. They told you shadow work would set you free, and in a way, it did. You're no longer performing that exhausting dance of being who everyone else needed you to be. But nobody prepared you for what freedom actually feels like. Nobody warned you that liberation can feel like isolation, that authenticity can feel like alienation, that finding yourself sometimes means losing everything else you thought you were. The silence after the storm. The world feels different, doesn't it? You're no longer pretending, no longer numbing, no longer running from the parts of yourself that make others uncomfortable. But nobody warned you about the quiet. Nobody mentioned how empty everything would feel once you stopped playing those old roles. It's like waking up in a house you've lived in for years, only to discover that every room has been rearranged. The furniture is the same, but nothing is where it used to be. Your friends feel distant, like you're speaking a language they can't understand. Your job feels hollow. Those tasks that once gave you purpose, they feel like elaborate distractions now. Your relationships are fragile, not because they're broken, but because you can no longer pretend that surface-level connection satisfies you. You've tasted depth. You've experienced what it feels like when someone truly sees you. And now, small talk feels like sandpaper on your soul. You're not in pain the way you used to be. Those sharp edges of unprocessed trauma have softened. The constant anxiety about being found out, about being too much or not enough, has quieted. But you're not fully alive either. You're somewhere in between who you were and who you're becoming, between the old world that no longer fits and a new world you can't quite see yet, between the familiar comfort of unconsciousness and the uncertain territory of awareness. This liminal space, this in-between place, is where most people get lost again, because we were never taught how to live after the mask falls off. We were never given a map for what comes after you stop running from yourself. The self-help industry talks endlessly about the breakthrough, the moment of realization, the cathartic release, the sudden clarity. But nobody talks about the breakdown that follows, not the kind that destroys, the kind that quietly dismantles everything you thought you knew about yourself. Nobody talks about the grief that comes with growth, the mourning process for the person you used to be, the strange sadness that accompanies freedom, the loneliness that shadows authenticity. Nobody prepares you for the way your nervous system reacts to not being in survival mode anymore, how your body, so accustomed to hypervigilance,
doesn't know what to do with safety. How your mind, trained to anticipate danger, struggles to rest in peace. You might find yourself crying over things that never used to affect you. A song on the radio, a stranger's kindness, the way sunlight filters through your window in the afternoon. It's not sadness. Exactly. It's more like your heart is finally soft enough to feel everything it couldn't feel before. You might notice that you sleep differently now, dream differently. Some nights, you sleep deeper than you have in years. Other nights, you lie awake, not with anxiety, but with a strange kind of alertness. Like some part of you is still adjusting to not having to guard the gates of your consciousness. Your appetite might change. Food tastes different when you're not eating to fill an emotional void. Some things you used to crave no longer appeal to you. Other flavors, textures, experiences that you never noticed before suddenly come alive on your tongue. This is your nervous system recalibrating. Your body is learning to exist without the constant flood of stress hormones. Your soul remembering what it feels like to inhabit your skin without apology. It's disorienting, like learning to walk again after years of running. Everything is slower, more deliberate, more conscious. And sometimes, it feels like you're moving through molasses while the rest of the world rushes past you. But here's what you need to know. This is not stagnation. This is not regression. This is not failure. This is transformation in its most vulnerable state. This is the cocoon phase. The part they don't show you in the butterfly metaphor. The dark, quiet, seemingly inactive period where everything that matters is happening beneath the surface. You are not lost. You are being born. When the world becomes a foreign language. Here's the thing nobody warns you about. Once you've done shadow work, you become fluent in a language most people don't even know exists. You start seeing the performance everywhere. The way people laugh just a little too loud at jokes that aren't funny. The way they fill every silence with chatter because quiet makes them uncomfortable. The way they ask, "How are you?" but their eyes are already looking past you to the next person. You notice the masks now, not because you're judging, you wore them too, but because you've taken yours off. You can see how heavy everyone else's must be, how exhausting it must be to hold up that facade day after day. You'll walk into a room full of people you've known for years and suddenly feel like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. Their concerns feel alien to you now. The things that used to keep you up at night, what people think of your outfit, whether you said the right thing at the meeting, if you're posting enough on social media, these anxieties feel like echoes from another lifetime. Remember Maya. 3 years ago, she was everyone's savior, the friend who worked 60-hour weeks and smiled through exhaustion, who dated men who needed fixing and wondered why love felt like drowning. Maya was successful, helpful, light. She was also disappearing, one people-pleasing decision at a time. The panic attacks started small, a tightness in her chest during meetings, tears in bathroom stalls, the strange sensation of watching her life from outside her body, wondering who this person was and when she'd agreed to become her. Shadow work found Maya the way it finds most of us, through crisis, through the uncomfortable realization that the life she'd built was beautiful from the outside and completely wrong for her soul on the inside. She spent months in therapy, journaling, doing the terrifying work of excavating the parts of herself she'd buried to be palatable, the anger she'd swallowed, the selfishness she'd been taught to be ashamed of. the deep, aching need to matter that she'd learned to shame into submission. The work was brutal. She discovered that her endless giving wasn't love. It was a desperate attempt to earn worth. That her inability to say no wasn't kindness. It was terror of rejection. That her need to fix everyone else was really her need to fix the broken parts of herself she couldn't face. Then came the breakthrough, the moment she could finally see the patterns, name the wounds, understand the why behind her endless giving. She felt powerful, enlightened, free. But Maya called me 6 months later, crying. "I thought I'd feel better," she said. "I thought once I understood, I'd know what to do. But I just feel lost, like I'm floating. I don't know who I am when I'm not saving someone." Maya had done the hardest part. She'd faced her shadow. She'd integrated her wholeness. But nobody had prepared her for what comes next. Nobody had told her that awareness is just the beginning. That insight without integration is just intellectual masturbation. That knowing why you do something doesn't automatically change the fact that you still do it. Nobody prepared her for the grief. The mourning process for all the versions of herself she'd never get to be because she'd spent so many years being who others needed her to be. The sadness that comes with realizing how much of your life you've lived unconsciously. Nobody warned her about loneliness. How isolating it feels to see clearly in a world full of people who are still sleepwalking. How hard it is to find connection when you can no longer engage in the surface-level interactions that most relationships are built on. Nobody told her that healing isn't linear. That you don't just face your shadow once and then live happily ever after. That integration is a daily practice, not a one-time event. Some days you'd feel like you've made all this progress, and other days you'd catch yourself falling back into old patterns and wonder if any of it even mattered. Most importantly, nobody prepared her for the question that would haunt her quiet moments. Now what? When you can no longer lose yourself in other people's problems? What do you do with all that energy? When you can no longer numb yourself with busyness? What do you do with the stillness? When you can no longer define yourself by how much you give? How do you figure out who you are? This is the phase where most people panic, where they feel the silence and interpret it as stagnation, where they mistake the stillness for emptiness and run back to the noise, the productivity, the hustle, the persona that once protected them from their own depth. Because it feels safer to perform than to be real, safer to achieve than to simply exist, safer to help others than to sit with the tenderness of your own becoming. The Sacred Detox. This is the stage where solitude becomes sacred, where your nervous system begins to detox from years of performance, where you stop seeking answers and start becoming the answer. And it hurts. Not because you're broken, but because you're waking up to everything you once abandoned to be accepted. Your sensitivity, which they taught you was weakness, reveals itself as your superpower. Your need for alone time, which they labeled antisocial, becomes the space where you remember who you are. Your intolerance for small talk, which they called rude, transforms into a deep hunger for connection that matters. You're not becoming someone new. You're becoming who you always were underneath the layers of conditioning and survival, underneath the desperate need to belong somewhere other than inside your own skin. Tonight, ask yourself, what part of me did I abandon to be loved? What aspect of my true nature am I ready to welcome home?
the temptation to go back to sleep. Now comes the shadow in a new form, not as trauma, but as temptation. The temptation to go back to sleep, to be light, to be safe, to shrink back into someone the world finds easier to digest. Your ego, still reeling from the exposure, still grieving the death of the false self it spent years constructing, whispers seductively in your ear, "Just soften your truth a bit. Smile more. Be normal again. This awakening thing is making people uncomfortable. Maybe you were happier when you didn't know so much. Maybe ignorance really was bliss." For a moment, the old life looks appealing. The simplicity of not feeling so deeply. The ease of relationships that don't require you to show up fully. The comfort of dreams that don't demand your whole soul. The safety of staying small. But you know too much now. You've felt too much. You've tasted what it's like to be authentic. And you can't unknow what you know about yourself. That's terrifying. Because the further you walk into your truth, the lonelier it gets. The alien at the dinner party. You'll find yourself at dinner parties surrounded by people you once called friends, feeling like an alien observing a species you no longer belong to. Their conversations about nothing will feel hollow. Their laughter will sound forced. Their complaints about problems you once shared will seem like echoes from a past life. You'll nod and smile and participate. But part of you will be floating above the scene, marveling at how you ever found meaning in these interactions that now feel like elaborate dances around anything real. You'll sit in meetings at work, listening to people discuss quarterly projections and strategic initiatives, and you'll wonder how you ever cared about any of it, how you ever derived meaning from numbers on a spreadsheet when there are souls to tend and mysteries to explore in your own heart. You'll scroll through social media and feel like you're looking at advertisements for a life you no longer want to buy. The carefully curated highlights, the performance of happiness, the endless striving for more. It will all feel exhausting rather than inspiring. You'll start grieving. A life you no longer belong to. Friends who no longer feel like home. Dreams that now feel like cages. Versions of yourself that once brought you pride, but now feel like costumes you've outgrown. This grief is sacred. It's the death of your false self. The ego death that makes room for your authentic being to breathe. David's corporate cage. Let me tell you about David. He spent his 20s climbing the corporate ladder, believing that success meant safety, that achievement meant worth. By 30, he was making 6 figures, had the corner office, the respect of his colleagues, the life his parents had dreamed of for him. But shadow work revealed the frightened child beneath the suit, the boy who learned that love was conditional on performance, that his worth was measured by achievements rather than his inherent value as a human being. David's shadow work began when he found himself crying in his car after another successful day. He'd just received a promotion, a raise, recognition for a project that had consumed his life for months. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he felt empty. The therapy sessions were brutal. David discovered that his drive for success was really a desperate attempt to earn his father's approval. A father who'd been emotionally absent, who'd measured love in terms of grades and trophies and eventually salaries and status symbols. He realized he'd never asked himself what he actually wanted. His entire adult life had been spent pursuing goals that weren't really his.
trying to become someone he thought would finally be worthy of love. After his breakthrough, David couldn't go back to caring about market share and profit margins the way he used to. The work felt meaningless. The competition felt petty. The late nights felt like a betrayal of something precious in him that he was finally starting to value. His girlfriend noticed. "You've changed," she said one night, and it wasn't a compliment. "You're not driven anymore. You're different. Softer. I don't know if I like it." David faced a choice that everyone on this path faces. Betray your awakening to keep your life intact, or honor your truth and let the cards fall where they may. The choice between truth and comfort. For months, David tried to have it both ways. He'd show up to work and perform enthusiasm he didn't feel. He'd go to networking events and play the ambitious professional while feeling like he was suffocating. But the split was killing him. The dissonance between who he was becoming and who he was pretending to be created a different kind of suffering. Not the sharp pain of unconscious wounds, but the dull ache of betraying yourself after you know better. Finally, David chose the truth. He didn't quit his job dramatically or end his relationship with fanfare. He simply stopped pretending, stopped performing with passion he didn't feel, stopped smiling when his soul was crying, stopped saying yes when everything in him was screaming no. He started setting boundaries at work. He stopped volunteering for projects that didn't align with his values. He began speaking up in meetings when he disagreed with decisions that felt unethical. The relationship ended. Some friendships faded. His career trajectory shifted as he stopped playing the games that once felt necessary for survival. But something else happened. Something his ego couldn't have predicted. He started attracting people who saw him, really saw him, who were drawn not to his performance, but to his presence, who didn't need him to be anything other than exactly who he was at that moment. His work became more meaningful. He couldn't fake enthusiasm for meaningless projects, but he found himself deeply invested in work that aligned with his values. He took a pay cut to join a nonprofit, and for the first time in his adult life, he looked forward to Monday mornings. Integration, the art of being yourself. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about individuation, not becoming someone special, but becoming specifically yourself. Not perfection, but authenticity. Not the elimination of flaws, but the integration of all parts of yourself into a conscious whole. Integration means saying no without guilt, even when it disappoints people you love. It means understanding that their disappointment is about their needs, not your wrongness. It means speaking when your voice shakes, because your truth matters more than your comfort. Because silence in the face of what's wrong is complicity with what's killing your soul. It means sitting with your own pain without reaching for distraction. Because you've learned that feelings are information, not emergencies. Those emotions are messengers, and you finally learned to listen to what they're trying to tell you. It means loving others without rescuing them. Because you understand that everyone has their own path to walk, their own lessons to learn, their own relationship with truth to develop. It means holding space for your complexity, your light and shadow, your wisdom and confusion, your strength and vulnerability, without trying to resolve the paradox into something neat and palatable. You're not here to fix yourself. You were never broken to begin with. You were just conditioned to believe that your authentic self wasn't acceptable.
that you needed to be different to be worthy of love and belonging. You're here to remember yourself, the self that was buried beneath survival strategies and personas and the exhausting performance of being who you thought you needed to be to matter in this world. And that remembering is the most radical act of all. In a world that profits from your self-doubt, that depends on your insecurity to sell you solutions, that needs you to believe you're incomplete to keep you consuming. Your wholeness is an act of rebellion. You've seen your shadow. You've survived the fire of facing yourself completely, all the parts you were taught to hide, all the aspects of your humanity you learned to shame. Now you must learn to live in the light without burning. You must learn to be authentic in a world that rewards performance, to be real in a culture addicted to art. You'll walk into rooms and feel like a stranger, not because you're arrogant or superior, but because you're awake in a world that's still sleeping, because you've tasted freedom from the matrix of conditioning. You'll crave depth in conversations that never move beyond the surface. You'll hunger for authenticity in relationships built on mutual performance. You'll seek meaning in a culture addicted to distraction. But don't let that dishearten you. Don't mistake your awakening for alienation. Don't let loneliness convince you that you've made a mistake in choosing authenticity over acceptance. The world may not clap for your truth, but someone, somewhere, will feel your presence and breathe easier. Not because you said something profound, not because you performed wisdom, but because you dared to be real. Your authenticity gives others permission to be authentic. Your willingness to be vulnerable makes space for others to drop their armor. Your refusal to pretend creates an invitation for others to stop pretending too. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You never were. You're here to be true to yourself, to honor the path your soul is walking, to live in alignment with what you've discovered about who you really are. This is your rebirth. It's not announced with fanfare. It doesn't come with certificates or congratulations. It's not loud or glamorous or Instagram-worthy, but it is holy. You survived facing your shadow. You walked through the fire of self-discovery and emerged not unburned, but transformed. Now live like it mattered. Not once, not as a peak experience you reminisce about, but every day, in small choices and big decisions, in how you treat yourself when no one is watching, in how you show up when the world invites you to shrink back into old patterns. You are no longer chasing the light, trying to become something other than what you are. You are the fire. You are the light you've been seeking. You are the answer to the question you've been asking. Not because you're perfect, not because you figured it all out, but because you finally stopped running from yourself and started running toward your truth. Welcome home to yourself, to your truth, to your magnificent, messy, sacred humanity. You made it, and now the real adventure begins.